Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Backlot 605 podcast. Here we are in week number 2 of Mel Brooks month for the month of April. I am one of your hosts. I am Casey Kelderman. Join with me is my co-host for the week, Sam Len. Sam, how the hell are you, buddy?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Ready to talk more Mel Brooks, especially knowing what I know going into this episode. Casey and I might have words.
We might throw fists virtually on this one, Sam. But that being said, we're going to be joined by a returning guest, Tad Good, from the First Time podcast. Fittingly enough, this is a first-time watch for myself and Tad. Tad, welcome back for the first time since, what was the last movie we had you on for?
Oh, it put me on the spot.
Is it Anatomy of a Murder?
Yes, I believe so.
That's it.
Yeah.
Quite a different,
Yeah, two
different
ends of
group
the
of
spectrum.
movies to talk about. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you guys so much for having me back on. It's always fun to talk movies with you guys.
Likewise,
Yeah,
it's always great to have you on and chat, and always great to hear your shows as well. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this. Before we get into this movie, though, Tad, what's your history with Mr. Mel Brooks? Are you a Mel Brooks fan? What's your favorite Mel Brooks movie?
I was thinking about that earlier today. I am a huge Mel Brooks fan. And when you invited me on, I was actually sort of excited that I didn't get picked for what I consider my favorite one, which is Young Frankenstein, just because I've owned like the Mel Brooks Blu-ray set, and I was like, I need to watch something other than the two I always go to, which is Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein, probably his two most well-known films. So it was exciting to sort of that's what my podcast is about too, is like, I want to see new things, not just sit on my comfort zone. So I grew up watching him. His films were not necessarily staples in our household, but my brother was a huge Star Wars guy, older brother, and so Spaceballs was almost like an unofficial Star Wars movie. It's always been. I'm probably going to get hate for this, but it's always been I say it's my favorite Star Wars movie. I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, so my favorite is when they spoof it. But no, I've always loved his films, and we've played a few at the Capitol, so it's been cool to see when we played Young Frankenstein a few times, and I don't think we played Blazing Saddles, but no, just seeing Young Frankenstein on a big screen is so cool too. So
it's funny you say that, because when we were first coming up with the series, and I was like, God, we got to have Tad back on. It's been a while, and I was like, Young Frankenstein, that seems like a Tad movie. But then I was like, well, let's do some new ones, because we can talk Young Frankenstein whenever the hell we want. Because I mean, for me and Sam too, it's one of our favorites, if not our favorite Mel Brooks movie. And last week we kind of talked about too. We kind of came up with this theory of your favorite Mel Brooks movie probably leans towards the genre of movie you like the most, or lean towards the most.
Yeah,
it was like for us, it's the horror movie. If Mel Brooks is going to do a horror movie, we're going to lean more towards Young Frankenstein, or in Sam's case, Dracula Dead and Loving It, or Star Wars if you're a sci-fi fan.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I think that, I don't know, I think that theory is going to stand this entire month, Sam, of this theory that we came up with. The genre you like most is going to lean towards your favorite Mel Brooks movie.
Yep.
So would that mean like this is no one's favorite? Because I don't know anyone who just likes historical. I don't know.
I don't think this is anybody's favorite. This is such a forgotten one in his filmography, I feel like.
I agree.
I even forget it, and I actually like this movie a lot. Yeah.
This is the one that comes up for me of like, when people talk about Mel Brooks movies, it's always like the one people always mention where I'm like, yeah, but I've never heard anyone ever like talk about it as like a passionate movie that they love. Like they always bring it up of, oh yeah, he did Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein and History of the World Part 1. And I'm like, yeah, but whose favorite movie is History of the World Part 1? Like, it feels like one of those movies that like everybody has seen or heard of, but it might not be their favorite movie. And again, maybe that just goes to how many people's favorite movie is a historical epic, I guess, is what I would put this in terms of what he's kind of spoofing in it.
Well, and you have to keep in mind too, like this, I mean, this movie isn't Mel Brooks in his like top form. Like it's a little more hit or miss than his like best works. And so when you're looking at someone like Mel Brooks who's done so many like hugely revered classics that are considered some of the best comedies of all time, when he does one that's just okay, it's easy to overlook it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I always sort of look back on movies from this era and think like a lot of it's nostalgia, but I also think a lot of that nostalgia comes from in that time it was like VHS or cable. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Young Frankenstein and especially Spaceballs, and still Spaceballs was like a staple on cable or HBO, or it was on somewhere all the time. I feel like those two, but
Yep.
especially Spaceballs. And this one is not one that I recall ever seeing on TV besides maybe like Turner Classic Movies or something, and you had to look out for it. But this doesn't have the replay value, I would say, of the other two. Like there's not as many
Yeah.
one-liners, like repeated quotes that people use like every day. I feel like I use, Young Frankenstein quotes, and Blazing Saddles has a million of those too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think it probably has a little bit to do with that, just not being on cable all the time like the others.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sam, you're a big fan of this movie, or at least more of a fan of
yeah.
History of the World. What was kind of like your history and your first like takeaway from the movie?
So I first saw this in a church basement at a youth group lock-in like my freshman year of high school, which is a really weird
I'm sure the
place to
Moses
watch this
joke went
movie.
over really well.
It was actually my youth group leader who played it. He was, I don't know, he was cool, man, but he was yeah. Um, I don't know. I didn't ever tell my parents that I watched that at a youth lock-in, but I remember loving it. You know, it was like 3 in the morning. I was delirious. I was hopped up on sugar, and I was watching this movie and I was laughing so hysterically hard. And I'd watched it a few more times after that, but I hadn't seen this movie in quite a while, and I agree that I don't think it has as much rewatchability as I initially thought. Um, I still liked this movie quite a bit, but this time around, it didn't. I don't know. It didn't hit all the same notes that I remember it hitting. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
The nostalgia kind of fell away a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, okay, this is still a very good movie. It's just not as good as what I remember it being, and so there was a little disappointment there. But I don't know.
Yeah, I knew
What do you guys think?
very little about this movie going in. I had seen the Moses 15 Commandments joke
Yeah.
before. I've seen that, and it's probably the most famous joke of this movie.
Yeah,
I think it's
probably.
the one that got the biggest laugh out of me while watching it. But all else I knew was what you told me, Sam, is you love Monty Python, you're gonna dig this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not as tight as Monty Python.
No, and I have kind of like a theory of why that is, because he is kind of doing this is a few years after Life of Brian, just like 2 years I think after Life of Brian came out from the Monty Python guys, and for me that's a pretty tight story and tight like little bits that they're doing the sketches that they have in that. Here is it's very loose in terms of what Brooks is going for. It's more akin to like the meaning of life from Monty Python than it is like Life of Brian. But where
Yeah.
I think those shine is that they have a team behind them, whereas this entire movie is the Mel Brooks show.
Right.
Directing, writing, he's the star of every era, every sketch of this movie, and I think he could have used either another person helping him write or having someone else star in this movie, because I think that's the biggest thing that hurt it for me is too often it was like the Mel Brooks shtick that he has in other movies, but he's only a bit part in all those movies. Like when he pops up in Blazing Saddles or Spaceballs, he's a small character in all of those. He's not even top 3, 4, 5 leads in those. He's a very small character, and here it's all Mel Brooks, and for me it just doesn't, I don't know, fully work. Kind of relies on the same bits over and over again.
Yeah, I think this movie kind of repeats itself in some gags a little bit. The kings being, slovenly, rapey dickheads, like
Yeah, yeah.
that's like the running gag of almost every single one. It's like by like the third time you see that like trope, you're like, yeah, we get it. Like they
It's good to
suck.
be
Let's move
king.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it works really well in like the Roman time with the stand-up philosopher, like because that's the first time you're seeing it. It's a little more fresh, and then they do it again like 2 more times, and you're just kind of like, okay. But that said, I think the short bits work the best. I think the Moses bits, the caveman stuff, I think all of that's really funny.
Oh yeah, still liked. I really love the caveman stuff. That's probably my favorite part of the movie, which is at the
Yeah.
beginning. So it's like it sort of blows its load right at the beginning, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Quite
yeah.
literally, it blows its load in the beginning.
Yeah, opens with that.
Yep. Yeah, it opens with that. It goes to the Moses thing. It goes to the Romans. And those are the 3 strongest segments for me. Everything that follows after that never quite lives up to anything that those have. I also think this movie could have done with more Madeline Kahn. But you, Casey, after hearing me on last week's show, you probably already knew that.
It needs more
I think
B.
she's
Arthur.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a big thing of it is like with all these sketches, it would have been nice if they pulled like a Monty Python and they're all playing different characters now in these different time periods. Because like I think the most charismatic person is Gregory Hines, Josephus in this, and he's only in the Roman section, and then shows up later as the same character. Just to, I don't know how to end this sketch. Let's bring back another one from a previous sketch. I think he's like got the most charisma in this movie, and he's a ton of fun to watch. I don't think a lot of his jokes really work or are complete. Like this feels like a very first draft type of movie to me. Especially like some of the musical numbers. Like his dance feels like really weird and awkward. Like I don't know am I supposed to be laughing or like is this like what's the vibe I'm supposed to be getting from this? And it feels very first draft to me in this.
It's to me it's like I wasn't sure going into this. Like I said, I swear I had seen it before and it was all new to me, but maybe I had seen just some of the small bits and I thought they're almost, stronger as sketches. Like this would be better as like a sketch comedy series if it was released in bits instead of one cohesive thing, because when you're putting up the same gag, like Sam said, over and over right after each other, if you had like a week between them or something, or if you had a new episode and it sort of goes back to that, it would feel a little different. But in a feature length movie that's sort of put together in parts, it gets a little tired. But I still say, even a bad or the worst Mel Brooks movie is still better than a lot of great comedies. It's still a good movie. Just we're comparing it to some of the greatest of all time. I mean, and the fact that we're sitting here comparing it to Monty Python is a good thing for it. Like to say it's not as strong as that, well, that's saying it's not as great as one of the greatest of all time. It's not a dig on it. I don't want people thinking that we hated it by any means. It's just for me, if it's definitely not going to get as many plays like as his other films, but I'd rewatch it, especially for I just love the caveman stuff, and I think that hurt it was like that was it's just dumb, simple humor, and then later it was just sort of like I don't know, it was just some of it was a little too mean spirited. And like you said, the humor is a little outdated, obviously a lot outdated in some parts, very stuff that would get old Mel canceled today. But of course, Blazing Saddles is probably the biggest example of that. Like almost every joke would offend someone now. But
And
Yeah,
it's funny
it's
though, I feel like this one is the one that's held up the worst because I don't feel like I mean, we kind
It
of talked
feels
about it when we talked about Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles, like some of the humor hasn't aged super well, like some of the things that they do in that movie, but you never get the sense that its heart's in the wrong place, you know, like it's on the right side of things. And I don't feel like History of the World Part One always has that. Especially like the use of the homophobic slur a couple of times. It's like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, that feels ugly. That
it's
just
it's
feels not
it's played
okay.
for laughs in this one, where like
Yeah,
Blazing Saddles felt more of like, oh, these are shitty people saying shitty things, whereas here it's Mel
yeah,
Brooks giving these jokes. We're supposed to
yeah.
be on his
It's
side
the
as the main
main
character, and it's like,
protagonist.
eh.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
here's the like, the movie started off pretty strong for me too. Like I think it worked better in like 10-minute chunks of like just doing like the caveman stuff is like 10 minutes long. The Spanish
mhm,
Inquisition too, which is like just kind of one big musical number. Like again, like I wish it was more of that type of stuff. Just these,
yeah,
8, 7, 8, 9, 10 minute little segments. But in the caveman one, like it starts off with like the first marriage and stuff, and it's just a guy that clubs a woman in the head and drags her off in the cave. And then it was like not long after is the first homosexual marriage, and it's just a guy beating another guy in the head and dragging him off. I'm like, oh, that's
That
still
yeah, that was
that's a funny
innocent and
joke. That's
funny. Yeah. It wasn't
yeah,
mean. Yeah.
yeah. But
yeah,
then 20 minutes later, he's dropping f bombs, and it's like, you started off
Yeah.
in the right place, Mel. I kind of
yeah,
backtracked pretty fast.
yep, yeah. It's a weird thing to follow up that particular caveman bit with because yeah, the caveman bit clearly comes from a place of like good spirits, and then it just I don't know. It was just a little tone deaf. Um, and so but I never felt that way. Like, well, I felt that way a few times with Blazing Saddles, but never to the point where I was like, man, they really missed the mark on this. Blazing Saddles pretty much consistently hits what it's aiming for, and I
Hmm.
didn't feel like this one did quite as much. But my favorite gag with the cavemen is the fire where they're chipping the two rocks, and the guy comes over with the torch, and he tries to light the rock, and the rock doesn't light, so he just throws the whole thing away. I'm just like, oh god, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
I
I
just
like the art, and with the birth of art is the birth of the critic, and he
yeah,
pees directly on the drawing. It's like exactly it's very relevant to today, where it's like the
yeah,
the big talk in the film circles is like the toxic fandom. It's like very much that, where it's like if something's being made somewhere, someone's criticizing it. You know,
yep, yep,
Hmm.
and not in a fun way. Like it's the people
no,
will literally just piss on whatever.
He's literally
Yeah,
taking a piss on a piece of art. Yeah.
yeah,
Like all that stuff works really like the first 10 minutes is really funny, and then as soon as we get into I mean, Moses is right at is kind of the bridge between the cavemen and then the Roman era. And I think the Moses bit too is obviously, like we said, maybe the most iconic bit of the movie. And again, it's like 2 minutes long. It's just a simple sketch. Like if this was on SNL or whatever, a sketch comedy show would be one of the big standouts. Just the fact that he
yeah,
walks out with three giant stones and he's about to read them off and just drops one. I don't
changes
know.
the history of Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I was like reading the IMDb trivia as I always do, and they said that Moses bit was not in the screenplay, but he sort of came up with it on the spot because he's looking around the set of the caveman like the era, and he's like, oh, I need some kind of like little bridge to go between these two bits, and ends up becoming one of the, if not the most iconic thing from the movie. And to me, it's like that sort of shows, like Casey said, that all the bits sort of feel half baked or like first draft. It's like Mel's almost
Mhm.
probably better when he's improvising or just off the cuff. And that's why
yeah,
these small short bits are so much better, because it feels like he doesn't really know where to go once they get longer. It's like
hmm
the tone and the direction and the pacing is weird on the longer bits, where I get bored very quickly. I'm like, let's move on because there's a lot of history we could cover. And I know the joke is this is part one, and then we get, jumping towards the end, we get the bits about part two. But I'm like, we could have just done smaller parts
Yeah.
and covered more history, you know.
Yep, absolutely.
We talked about it last week with Blazing Saddles, and especially like parody. Like, to make great parody, you got to be a great movie first and foremost. You got to have your own like special, unique characters that make the movie great, and then whatever you're parodying, that's just kind of the cherry on top of it. Like with Blazing Saddles, you still have memorable characters that you still remember throughout that movie. Same with Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein, obviously the big Mel Brooks movies. Here it's like it felt very disjointed of Mel either should have stuck in a certain time era and did what he did best, focus on characters and having the characters go through different situations, or gone full sketch comedy. Each is only 10 minutes long. You don't have to worry about like setting up a unique story, because I think the strongest part of the Roman part is him also trying to tell a story with the characters and progressing that. And for me, like story wise, that's the most unique part, and the part that works the most is that, because even though we said, you know, some discrepancies in the jokes that Mel Brooks gives as the stand-up comedian in Roman times, it's still a good story. Whereas like the King one is like the same joke over and over. Like, it's great to be king. It's like, yeah, we get that, but like, what else is happening here? You're doing the same joke. Whereas, and I think, like Sam said, like the movie could have used more Madeline Kahn. She is one of the most recognizable characters out of this movie, and I wish they would have done more with her, because she is super interesting, especially with like, they could have done something with Josephus, like, and her, like they built up a joke and it never really paid off.
Yep.
I did think Gregory Hines was really, really funny when he was on screen. I just felt like you said, Mel sort of takes every scene he's in, and I'm like, give him a little more space, because he's really funny whenever he's on there. But I felt like, again, maybe some of the writing for him wasn't as, like, I don't know, it felt like maybe he was stepping in for somebody or something, but he was really funny.
Yeah, he's
like,
maybe
charisma.
The best character in the whole thing. Yeah, and I think part of that is just he's written pretty well. I feel like he's underserved, but there's at least something of a character to him. There's something of, and then Hines just performs him so perfectly, and he bounces off of everybody in the cast so effortlessly in a way that I don't feel like Mel Brooks necessarily does. Like, some of Mel Brooks's interactions with other characters feel like he's doing a shtick against someone rather than actually just having a conversation with them. But you never get that with Josephus and Gregory Hines' character. It actually feels like he's a person interacting with another person, not a person fishing for a laugh. And everything between him and Madeline Kahn is so good that they could have stayed in Roman times for the rest of the movie, and I would have been absolutely fine with that. I would love to see a feature-length version of that particular bit in this. But
it's called Life of Brian.
Yeah, that's fair.
But no, I do agree, though. It is the strongest part of the movie, and probably, like, if they did expand that to be like the bulk of the movie, I think it would have benefited it, because then you could have ended with the Spanish Inquisition, like, musical number, and then part 2, like, as your kind of stingers at the end of the movie. But because I think what's right after the Spanish Inquisition, that era, it was the French Revolution, right?
The French Revolution, which is by far the worst one.
Yeah.
Because you're just kind of following Mel Brooks as king, and he's just like, he's groping women and like tackling the queen with a bunch of other dudes, and like just shooting people, and you're just like, I don't know, this is just weird. It's like you took the emperor character from Roman times and then just made him the main character of this next segment. Like, that just feels weird. I don't know. I just wasn't vibing with it this time around.
I did like, instead of like having clay pigeons, he had people. Like, I thought that's a funny bit.
Gag.
like it felt like kind of, I don't know. It felt a little lifeless to me. Did it feel a little lifeless to you guys? Like I'm like, that's a really funny bit, but the way it's played off, especially where it comes in terms of, that section of the movie felt, I don't know, felt off. Felt a little off to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
he says something about like I don't condemn or I condemn violence, and then they shot put him, but yeah, it's not played up as hard as some of the other gags, and it just sort of feels like it's like it's a funny bit, like commit to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. You're right, Casey. That segment just feels lifeless, and maybe it's because like Mel Brooks isn't playing off of a lot of people in that one. Like it's that out of all of them, that's the one where he's the most like on his own, and it could use a supporting player like Madeline Kahn to give some kind of fresh perspective, to give something like something of substance for him to bounce off of,
Mm-hmm. And it's
Yeah.
like, and that one especially kind of relies, like we said, on like repeating jokes. Like it relies on,
Mhm.
oh, it's good to be king. I think another one that just doesn't always work, how many times they play it, especially, is the Count de Monet. Instead of
Oh, yeah.
count the money. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Yeah.
a funny play on words, but it's like he kept going back to that joke. It's like,
Yeah.
like play it once or twice for laughs, and then have the character where I think it gets the funniest laugh is when he's Count de Monet says Count de Money. And he like
Mhm.
corrects himself. I'm like, that's funny. But you
Yep.
played it up a little bit too much before that.
Yep. Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I do want to bring some positives into this because I think we've been
Yeah.
pretty negative. The Spanish Inquisition number, I want to get your guys' thoughts on. It's literally there just to be a musical number, which I find kind
Yeah.
of fascinating that he literally goes to this entire new era of time, and it's all just for this like 6-7 minute long musical number, and then we leave
Where
that
it's just
era
different
right
people getting
after.
tortured. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't necessarily like it, but it's a very Mel Brooks thing to do, and so I don't really hate it. I just don't. I'm just very indifferent towards it. That's all it is. Like
Mhm.
it's fun. I'm glad Mel Brooks put it in because it feels like that part of the movie kind of comes alive a little bit. But I also don't think the bit entirely works. It's just more of it's there, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
also a
think
big fan of just people doing whatever the hell they want with their movies. So props to Mel Brooks.
I mean, it was more so, of the times where you would throw just something crazy like a musical bit in there, and I give Mel Brooks props for, like you said, sort of ballsy. I mean, at this point, he can sort of do what he wants, but throwing in a whole era that is just a musical bit. I thought playing the knees with like the bones was funny, um, but feels like for him, it could have been something more memorable. Like we remember the musical bit from Young Frankenstein. It's
Hmm.
just I don't know. It's fine, but it's
Yeah.
not his best work. But it's still funny.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, like, as in terms of like the music of it, like I was trying to figure out, like, am I supposed to be like laughing along with this? Like, what's the point of the musical part of it? Like, I think production wise, it looks incredible. Like, it's one of the best looking things in this movie, and how much effort he put into it. The huge sets that they kind of end off on. I'm like, that's incredible. This would be nice if like we had this mixed in with the rest of the story, and like all of a sudden in the middle of the whatever Roman times, for example, we get this huge musical number that happens in the middle of it, and we never do another musical number after that. Like it's just a fun little bit in the middle of it. But here it's like it just feels very weird because it's like what are we trying to say? I guess like what's the joke? I hate
Sort of
saying that during in a
tacked on.
comedy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hate saying that during a comedy. Like what's the joke? But in a comedy, you gotta have a
Yeah.
joke. Like
It feels like a setup that doesn't really have a punchline.
yeah.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
Like
Well,
as
you
far
sort
as
of.
like,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like to piggyback off you, like when he's playing like drums off the knees, I'm like, that's a funny bit. Like that feels like very kinetic and like, oh, there's something like at least visually funny going on here, and adds to the
Mhm.
production because it's like this huge line of like 12 people, and he's playing the drums off of each one. Like that's funny, but I don't know what else is going on to like have that be like a staple point to the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with you sort of said with trying to find positives. I think with this and for most of the movie, visually the sets are gorgeous. The costuming's really on point. Like visually, it's so cool. I mean, it opens up with a gorgeous sunset and the titles, and then of course the whole juxtaposition of it being a beautiful skyline, and then these man stands up and jerks off. It's so funny. But like visually, it's like this looks like an expensive movie. Like the sets, everything
Mhm.
are sort. I mean, it had, of course, you had to if you're going to parody an epic, and I think that's what Mel's always done great with the parodies is that you have to, you can't look cheaper than your source. Like Spaceballs has really cool, pretty good special effects for the time. Young Frankenstein,
Yep.
he does in black and white, and it's the cinematography is gorgeous, and the costuming and makeup is really gorgeous. So he's always, it's like you can't skimp on that because then it starts looking like less of a parody and more of like just a cheap like gag or something. I don't know, but
It
this is
starts
like,
looking like date movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And this like I think there was one called Epic Movie, right? Like a parody
Mhm.
at the height
Yeah.
of that, and
Yep.
I never saw it. I'd be curious to see run it as a double feature with this or something, and it might make us appreciate this one a lot more.
Yeah.
But the sets and stuff are so great in this, and like I said, it looks very expensive. Like it looks
Mhm.
like an epic.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's one thing we touched on with Blazing Saddles too, and I think obviously we're gonna hit it every time. Is that Mel is just a really good filmmaker. It just happens to be he makes movies in the comedy genre instead of
Mhm.
like dramas or epics or westerns, or he decides to put all of those inside of a comedy lens, which like we said last week, Mel Brooks could probably make Goodfellas, but Scorsese probably couldn't make Blazing Saddles. I still feel
Yeah.
that's true for history of the world, but it's just one of the lesser Mels. But it
Yeah.
is like if you look at it in the parody aspect and what it's parodying, it's much better than like epic movie and disaster movie and
Hmm.
whatever knockoff we get nowadays, where
Yeah.
Mel sticks to like again telling his own jokes and not relying on like too many gags of pop culture, which he never really does in his movies. Where he does, it's Star Wars, but that's the whole movie. That's what he's
Right. That's
parodying is Star Wars. So to have
yep.
pop culture references towards Star Wars and Spaceballs, it's like, yeah, that makes sense because that's what the parody joke is after. And I think, I don't know, I still think even lesser Mel, a lot of comedy writers can still learn a lot from him, and how to structure jokes and parody. And I mean, prime example, my favorite joke of the movie, like we said, the Moses joke is like such a small little bit. It's just these funny little anecdote of what if Moses had 15 commandments and he dropped one. Like I
And
think
He
that's hilarious.
Mel did produce David Lynch's Elephant Man, so he has worked on dramatic stuff, and that was
mhm.
John Hurt won the Oscar for that, so it's sort of cool to like see the bridge there. But yeah, I mean, you watch some of these, if you go back and watch some of these spoofs from that sort of scary movie era where that brought it back, and then every movie's parodied, they are so bad because they're making pop culture references to things that are no longer relevant, and it's just so cringy now. Where you
Mhm.
watch Airplane, not even a Mel Brooks movie, but you go back and watch Airplane or any of these films, they're not relying on that, and that's what's so great about them. There might
Yep.
be references to other, obviously, Young Frankenstein's right in the title, but I also think it helps that he's referencing something so classic with Star
Yeah.
Wars 2, like something that's a permanent part
Mhm.
of our pop culture. It's still relevant today, where I mean, there's like Michael Jackson jokes in like Scary Movie 4, and they're making fun of M. Night Shyamalan, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so kids now they'd watch it and they would not get a single joke because it's all referencing things they've never seen or heard of.
Yep. Yeah, those are definitely like if you didn't grow up watching like Scary Movie is not a movie for you. You know, like it's
No, no.
just you had to be in a very specific snapshot of time and horror fandom to appreciate what Scary Movie was doing. But that's the thing with the Mel Brooks ones is you don't have to. Like I feel like people who I probably saw Spaceballs before I even saw Star Wars, to be honest. And I like I don't know. I still think Mel Brooks focuses on the film before he focuses on anything else. Like he always feels like he's coming from a genuine place of I love the movies that I am kind of sending up, you know.
Right.
You get the idea that he likes Star Wars. You get the idea that he likes epics like Clash of the Titans and Ben-Hur, and you get the idea that he likes Robin Hood, you know, even the Kevin Costner one, because how do you make a movie like Robin Hood Men in Tights without loving Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, which it's very squarely conceived from? You know, you can't make a movie like that without having some sort of affection for what you're sending up. And that's what Mel's always done beautifully.
Yeah, like a respect for the source material.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great parody isn't punching down on what you're parroting. It's
Yeah.
you're making fun of it, but you're having fun, and it's in a loving, lighthearted way. Like Young Frankenstein is a great Frankenstein sequel adaptation, which whatever. First and foremost, just happens to be really, really funny and one of the great comedies ever. Same with Blazing Saddles. It's a classic Western story that just happens to be a movie that ends in it ending on a movie set
Ending at the Chinese Grauman Theater.
Yeah. And then this movie too. I don't think the ending hits as it obviously doesn't hit as hard as Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles is one of the great third acts of any comedy ever. Where this one, I was waiting for like a big punchline ending because they're as soon as they hop on the chariot, Miracle, which kind of relying on the same joke that he did in the last bit, where they hop on the horse and they're riding off kind of into the sunset, and they're like, well, look, the end, it's so big, it's almost here, and it's just kind of a map painting that says the end. I'm like, you could have like drove through the screen or something. Like, I don't know, there's a bit, like it felt like a joke was set up, and again, kind of not paid off.
Yeah, I know obviously Roman history came before the French Revolution, and there's a reason that, but he should have ended with the chariot race and the giant blunt, because that's one of my favorite gags of the whole movie is they just get the Roman stones and they just follow the blunt into the open field. I just think that's hilarious, first of all. And B, like it feels like a joke that you end a movie on, you know? I don't know. I thought it had more epic, historic, I don't know, a more epic and historic feel than what we ended up getting with the ending. But then we get a tease for, part 2, which is hilarious. Did you guys know they're actually doing a part 2?
So that it's
Mel
been
Brooks
talked
is
about
doing a series
since this came out, but I think Mel is actually doing a part 2.
I think he's doing it with Amazon. Which, I mean, God, I hate Jeff Bezos, but I'll keep my Prime subscription for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, they brought back Kids in the Hall, so he can,
right?
yeah, he that sort of makes up for a lot of the horrible things he's doing, but yeah. Not all of them, just some of them.
Some of them. It's a TV series, right, that they announced?
It's going to be like a TV anthology.
Yeah, this works so much better as a TV.
That's a good idea.
That works so much better. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think Brooks is actually like writing it, or like has a hand in writing it. So, but obviously, I'm sure they'll surround him with writers that have more modern sensibilities. Maybe, I don't know. I'll
Hopefully,
just
it's
be
better than the
interested to see what they
Spaceballs
do with
animated
it.
show that they did.
Oh, I
I
didn't
never
even.
watched that.
Yeah, I never saw it. Didn't even know it existed.
It's not good.
I know that's one that's
Spaceballs,
been.
the
They
animated
talked to.
series.
they've been talking about doing Spaceballs 2 forever too, but I think there's all kinds of stories behind that one. I mean, I'm sure you guys cover it, but it's like, the whole what they had to jump through and agree to not do to be able to make Spaceballs, to get to make George Lucas not basically shut them down.
Yeah, that's the thing when you're parodying something and you don't have the full support of the people that you're parodying. I mean, Weird Al's talked about it a lot, where he's like, like if I don't get, nine times out of 10, people will agree, but there are times that people won't, or they'll have ridiculous stipulations where I just can't abide, like, and I don't know. I feel like, especially if it's someone like Weird Al or like Mel Brooks, it's obviously not coming from a place that they're not trying to do any damage to your brand. They're trying to
Yeah.
send
Right.
up a loving homage to it, and I never understood that. I never understood why people got so uptight about that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
those are two names that have built up enough goodwill that it's kind of like, yeah, just let them do it. You can trust them
Yeah.
to not like destroy your brand, like you said, or punch down on them. Yeah, I'm hoping for the best for this series. I'm still excited because I hope we get some of the teases that this movie ends up on in a little bit bigger form, because I think they're really, really funny. Jews in space, being one.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of got that already. It's the teaser for Spaceballs, but I still think it's a really, really funny bit that this movie ends off on these like fake trailers for the upcoming part 2 that takes 40 years to come out.
Yeah, sort of ahead of its time with that.
Yeah. If one of the segments on this new series isn't like a very Jewish Star Trek episode, I'm going to be very upset.
If
Like,
Hitler on Ice doesn't come to fruition, I think people will riot. Like, those bits are super funny, and it makes me like kind of contemplate, like, oh, was I really too hard on the rest of the movie? I don't think so, but I think
No.
just those bits are like the smaller little punches that Mel Brooks have. I think just works better in the format he's going for, and gets the biggest laughs. I mean, to end a movie on big laughs like that, I mean, you're obviously doing something right.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, because I agree. I think this movie begins really strong, and in the last 5 minutes it picks up and it ends really well. But there's just that lull in the middle where it's just never quite as funny or fleshed out as it needs to be. There's so much gold here, though, is the thing. There are so many things that I love about this movie that I don't know. I can't not recommend it. I still love this movie. It's not one of Mel Brooks's strongest. It's uneven. It's pretty scattershot, but a bad Mel Brooks movie, or a bad Mel Brooks movie, is still a great movie. So,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I guess we'll get to our final thoughts here. I don't know if I'd recommend the movie. I think I would recommend this as go to YouTube and like type in best of History of the World Part 1, and you're gonna get kind of the bits that we praised here, like the Moses bit. Oh, we didn't touch on another one where I got a big chuckle out of when they bring Moses back to do the parting of the sea, and it's just this little river that he's doing it, and the reason his hands are up is someone is robbing him.
Robbing him. Yeah, that bit's hilarious. I forgot about that, and that one made me laugh really loud. That was one of the, oh god, I shouldn't be watching this late at night. My neighbors are gonna wake up.
I thought you were gonna say one of those that you shouldn't be watching it at your youth group at your church.
Oh yeah, no. Well, that too, yes. Yeah, what a strange movie to show youth group
No,
kids, but I'm
I think
so
that's
glad he
cool
did.
because yeah, I think that's cool because it's like you don't take yourself too seriously, because if you
Yep.
do, you're gonna drive people away. Like if you can't laugh at yourself, you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not mean-spirited, it's not saying religion is stupid or anything. It's just laughing.
Yeah.
It's innocent, pretty innocent fun. So to me, that was really cool of that, pastor or whoever showed that to you guys because it's sort of
Yeah.
like, it's this isn't always all like doom and gloom, you sort of
Right.
I don't know. It's a good way
It is
to keep people interested.
it is one of my very few fond memories of church. So
I
with
will
that,
say
yeah.
we said there's not enough Madeline Kahn in this movie. There's not enough Jesus in this movie. Could have used some more Jesus bits because the Last Supper one
The Last
is
Supper
is
bit is
pretty
really
funny.
funny.
Well, the cameos in this are pretty funny. We have B. Arthur, Hugh Hefner.
Mhm.
Trying to think of who else. I know I read that there was actual like Playboy Playmates played all the women in that scene, but I
Oh,
didn't.
the
I thought it was like a parody of Hugh Hefner, and then I looked up and it actually was Hugh Hefner when he was younger,
Mhm.
basically playing himself in history, and that's pretty funny. But B. Arthur, I just cracked up. She's working at the unemployment office. That was pretty funny. It's like you're gonna
yeah.
have to kill some more people if by next week you got to get back to killing people.
Yeah.
Also, Orson Welles doing the opening narration
Yes.
for the movie.
Yeah. It's
I was like,
cool.
someone famous played Jesus. I had to look it up quick. John Hurt was
Yep.
Jesus, so that's
Yep.
that's cool. Again, probably why I'm saying they could use more Jesus. That would have been
More
good
John
to
Hurt.
have Jesus as a
Right.
reoccurring character throughout this movie. All
I
right.
don't
Well,
know. You have Jesus getting robbed at gunpoint, and you might have an issue.
Sam, wait till we get to our double feature. I'm going to bring Jesus back up for this. You can probably guess what movie I'm going to
I can
pick.
probably guess.
Yeah, let's get into it. So if you guys are going to recommend History of the World Part 1 to someone else and you guys are going to do a double feature of History of the World Part 1 and blank, what movie are you going to pick that is not another Mel Brooks movie?
I have
I'll
one.
go ahead.
Okay. Um, I'm gonna go with another historical epic that makes me laugh a lot. It's very in tune with my sense of humor, and that is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I think you get a good glimpse of history through the eyes of two metalhead slackers, and I don't know, I love that movie. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, God, what do I pair with that? And I was thinking about going with something like an actual epic. And then I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do another movie that just makes me laugh. And so yeah, it's gonna be Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I love that movie. One of my favorites all time.
Good choice.
I was going to say, do we get a Socrates in this movie? I don't think he shows up, does he?
I don't think
No,
so.
because Mel Brooks is essentially Socrates.
Yeah. He's not as good as Bill and Ted Socrates.
No, he's not.
Tad, what about you? What are you going to pair History of the World with?
Maybe I mentioned it earlier, and this is probably like an easy go-to answer, but I'd say maybe Airplane, another classic spoof,
Oh yeah.
and just be a funny, like old school night. And that's the closest thing to a Mel Brooks movie we have that's not a Mel Brooks movie. Or you could
Yeah.
go the other way and do Passion of the Christ, which is just like horrific and really, just make this so much funnier because it's like, oh man, I just watched. It depends on what order you play them in, but you have to watch Passion of the Christ first, and then this will be the palate cleanser.
Yeah. Oh God.
It's a
That's
Mel
awesome.
double feature, just two very different
Different Mel.
ideologies between Gibson
Oh
and
gosh, very different. Yes.
Oh God.
I like that one.
I like that one too.
I'm gonna go with a different Jesus movie. I'm gonna go Life of Brian. I think that's for me the easy answer. I think it does what Mel Brooks is trying to do, but better because it's Monty Python, and I think Life of Brian's one of the great comedies of all time. So yeah, easy pick for me to pop on Life of Brian right after this.
Yeah.
Which is playing at the Sioux Falls State Theater this
Yeah.
weekend on Easter weekend. So
Yeah.
Get those plugs in.
Heck yeah.
I'm excited to whistle along to Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. So
I just watched Legally Blonde at the State. First time I've ever seen that movie. Oh my God. I loved it. Like, it was an instant 5-star banger for me. I was like, how have I never seen this before? This checks all my boxes. Reese Witherspoon's incredible. Not that that has anything to do with this movie or this podcast. I just wanted to say that. If you haven't seen Legally Blonde yet, people, go out and watch it. It's tremendous.
Sam's
Have
big
you guys
recommend
seen
for
it?
the
You're
week.
being
I've
real
never
quiet.
seen Legally Blonde.
I've never seen it either, and
Okay.
it's one of those movies that has like a cult following by like people that I know. That it's like one of those movies where it's like, how could I like this? But people that I would not expect to like it love it. So apparently there's something to it.
I'm not gonna lie, there were a few moments that had me like, I thought I was gonna get ejected from the theater because I was laughing so hard. Most of them from Jennifer Coolidge. She's just incredible in it. Yeah, so yeah, guys, go watch Legally Blonde. Holy shit. Yeah. And then let me know what you think of it, because I loved it. So
Sam's big take for the week: go watch Legally Blonde on the big screen too. The best way to watch it. Who wants to watch a Stanley Kubrick movie when you can watch Legally Blonde at the State?
I already I almost messaged Steven walking out of the theater going like, when are you booking Legally Blonde 2? Because I need it. But so Steven, if you're listening, Legally Blonde 2, Red, White, and Blonde.
I expect next week we'll get Sam's take on Legally Blonde 2, but we'll have to wait out for that when we talk Men in Tights, right? That's next week's show. Yeah. So we're talking Robin Hood, Men in Tights next week. So a little homework for everybody out there. I guess let's get to the plugs for this week. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and on YouTube to hear the rest of our Mel Brooks series. Like I said, Men in Tights next week. And then we're rounding things out with Dracula Dead and Loving It. We're not even touching Spaceballs, not touching Young Frankenstein. I blame Sam for this one. Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Tad, I got this at your festival, man, at Halloween-a-Palooza.
Yeah. Right on.
So we can blame Tad for seeing him that weekend and subliminally telling Sam to pick up Dracula Dead and Loving It.
I've never seen that one either, so one of the few Mel Brooks I haven't seen.
I really like it. It's not very good, but I really like it.
I'm excited to watch it. I have not watched it yet, but after us watching Nosferatu, I'm in a Dracula mood again. So I'm ready for the exact opposite of a silent German film for Leslie Nielsen as Dracula.
He's a great Dracula. I'm not even kidding.
Let's get to the rest of the plug, Sam. I'll hit the socials here. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, all under @Backlot605, so you can find us all there. Sam, where can they find us on Patreon?
Well, if you like this and you like more, you can always go to patreon.com/Backlot605 for 4 bonus episodes a month. This month we're doing 3, but they're very special ones. Can we announce what we're doing for Patreon this month?
Sure.
Okay. So this month, we're doing 3 big, celebrating all 3 of us hosts, Casey, Brian, and I. We've each picked 5 movies that we have not talked about on the podcast so far. And we are going to do a Casey episode where we talk about his 5 movies, and then a Sam episode where we talk about my 5 movies, and then a Brian episode where I only know 2 of Brian's 5 movies, so I have homework to do for that one.
It's pretty much our 5 favorite movies ever that somehow we have not touched on yet. So that'll be on our Patreon this month for the people out there listening.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really
fun. Awesome.
Tad, where can they find anything and everything that you do on the internet?
Oh, I'm doing too much on the internet. You can find right now, submissions are open for Snake Alley Festival film. We're coming back in July with our 10th year. So if you have any short films, screenplays, music videos, animations, horror, sci-fi, drama, comedy, documentaries, anything, head over to filmfreeway.com/Snake Alley Festival film, or just find us on any of the social Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and there's links there too. You can listen to First Time Podcast, available Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, everywhere else. And then same with Attack of the Killer Podcast. You can find on that one's a lot easier to find than First Time. I should have thought of that when I named the podcast. When you type in First Time, there's like First Time Homeowners, First Time Parents, First Time Barbers. There's First Time everything. So yeah, find First Time Podcast on Facebook, and it has links under every post on where you can listen to us. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Too many podcasts, though.
Yeah, but both are really good shows. I'll personally vouch for both of them. So
thank you.
Yeah, just gonna say the same. Both are a treat to listen to, and I'm excited to listen to your latest First Time after I watched the new movie, because you just did everything. I'm gonna butcher
everywhere all at once. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm so
we saw
excited.
it Thursday. Yeah, we saw it Thursday, and I was like, we left the theater, and I was like, we're gonna go home and record. Like, let's not talk about it on the drive home, because we had to drive like 2 hours to see it. I'm like, let's not talk about it. Don't say anything on the drive home besides like, I liked it. And Nikki was like, it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I'm okay. Leave it at that. We'll save it for the podcast. And we sat down and just gushed over it for 2 hours. It's not even like fair. It was just literally just us talking about how much we loved it. So yeah, wait until you see it to listen, because it's spoiler filled, and like I said, it's probably not a fair review, because it's just us. There's no flaws in it as far as we saw. So yeah, go see it. I loved it. My favorite movie of the last probably 5 years. It's so good.
Damn, that's high praise. I just watched Swiss Army Man for the first time last week, and I've been obsessed with it. Like, I've not been able to get it out of my head. I've actually watched it like 3 times just in 1 week, because I'm like that. I'm neurotic. But
see, I saw that in the same theater that I saw, or the smaller version of Film Scene. Then they build a new one, and I'll never forget seeing that opening night, Swiss Army Man, and the people who run the theater came out and they said, you're about to see the best in fart house cinema. And that stuck in my, instead of art house is fart house, it stuck in my mind. But my wife, she has movie sleeves tattooed up and down her arm, and she has the like Swiss Army Man one on her bicep, and it's like Daniel Radcliffe's leg sticking out of a life preserve with like the fart cloud coming out of his butt. It's so good.
I love it. Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, their new one, Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's playing in the state in a few weeks, so I'm holding off. It's at Cinemark just up the road, but I really want to see it at the state for the first time. So yeah, I'm stoked though.
Sioux Falls, for once, getting spoiled with riches for a new independent smaller film. For some reason or another, we have it playing in multiple theaters. Yeah, I'm very excited to watch it. I have not watched Swiss Army Man yet, so I might need to pop
Casey,
that on.
you're gonna love it, man.
Again, it's one of those movies, like, I've owned it for like however long it's been out, and I just have not popped the DVD, and so hopefully we'll try to do that before I go to watch.
I listen to the score for that like once a week while I'm working too. Manchester Orchestra did the score, and it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. So good. It's
you never think you'd cry during like a farting corpse movie, but I cry every time I watch it.
Yep. There's one fart in particular. I hear it and it's just waterworks. I'm like, no way, this movie is not doing this.
Yeah.
It's so good.
You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll fart.
Yes.
I guess we're gonna leave it at that with the Wayne's World tagline, except for farts instead. Tad, thank you so much for coming on, man. This is always so much fun to talk with you. Yeah, everybody go listen to both of Tad's podcasts, First Time and Attack of the Killer podcast. Go check them out. Sam, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off for this week?
Go watch History of the World Part 1. Go watch Swiss Army Man. If you can, go watch Everything Everywhere All at Once.
And Legally Blonde.
those are my movie recs for the week.
Those are Sam's Recs for the week, especially Legally Blonde.
Yes.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Thank you all for listening. Again, next week, Robin Hood, Men in Tights, and maybe Legally Blonde 2 if we get to it. Thank you all again, and we will check you out next time right here on the Backlot, South Dakota.